You're listening to the winning literary show, Off the Shelf Books Talk Radio, live with host Denise Turney, author of the books Long Walk Up, Portia, Love Pour Over Me, Spiral, Love Has Many Faces, and Rosetta's Great Hope. Turn up your dial and get ready for a blast of feature author interviews, 411 on book festivals, writing conferences, and so much more. Ready? Let's go.
You can either experience the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The choice is yours. And that's a quote, and that the source is unknown. I want to repeat that. Just to kick off today's show, a thought to drop into your mind. You can either experience the pain of discipline, go out and get it done. You guys, it's mid-April already, or the pain of regret. The choice is yours. You can either do it or not do it. So I want to welcome you, welcome to this Saturday's April the 16th show. To our loyal listeners, you guys, 16 years Off the Shelf has been on the air. We started on the radio, then moved to a podcast format. But I want to thank our loyal listeners. And for those who tune in on so many different platforms all over the world, if this is your first time tuning in, I want to let you know that you absolutely are listening to the Winning Book Radio Podcast, Off the Shelf, and thank you for joining us this morning. We have a guest on. I learn from every guest, and I'm so excited to introduce today's guest to you and learn what she has to share with us here on Off the Shelf this morning. But before I do that, I want to introduce you. Every book is not for everybody, and I've been at this over 40 years, so I know that for sure. But I wanted to ask you, for those of you who love mystery, you love a suspense. Some people like a romantic mystery. They just want some mystery in it. Some people love a thriller. Some people like a real-life mystery. You're just hanging on the edge of your seat, wanting to know how's it going to turn out, what's going to happen. I know I like a good mystery. I like to try to figure it out before the author or the movie or the play reveals what is happening. If you love mysteries, if you love thrillers, and I'm talking a fast-paced, page-turning thriller, mystery and suspense, I encourage you to get a copy of Escaping Toward Freedom. The subject of this book has made headline news. Escaping Toward Freedom by Denise Turney. It's an ebook, paperback, hardback, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Amazon, independent bookstores, you name it. Again, Escaping Toward Freedom by Denise Turney. Please go get a copy and let me know how you enjoy the book. And you can read free excerpts at my website, which is Chistel, CHISTELL.com. Again, that's CHISTELL.com. And now, let us go and meet our very special off-the-shelf guest. And today's off-the-shelf guest is Tasha Keeble. Tasha is a mother and the author of the book Call Me Freedom, A Black American Woman Breaks from Empire. She has worked as a curriculum writer, editor, and blogger. And in addition, Tasha is an English instructor and adjunct professor within the Chabot Las Positas Community College District. We are honored to have Tasha with us on Off the Shelf this morning. Welcome to Off the Shelf, Tasha.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you this morning?
I am blessed. It's an Easter weekend, and I am blessed and happy to have you here and to hear what you share with our listeners who tune in from around the world live and then even more tune in through the archives. Now, the first two questions I'm going to ask you, Tasha, I ask every guest, it's only like 3 or 4 questions, just so our listeners can get a little backstory on the guest before we start talking about their books and their other works. So to kick off today's show, Tasha, can you tell off-the-shelf listeners where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, to start, I was born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I consider that my home. But I left back and forth, and we came back and forth. I had my mother married my stepfather when I was very young, and so we left Arkansas and went to California. We moved to Santa Barbara area, And excuse me, for the most part, I stayed in California. But there were times when I would come. We always came back and forth, for summers or for holidays. And I actually went to school in Arkansas for 2 years growing up. So I always consider myself having been raised in California by way of Arkansas. Growing up, I would say that I grew up in a very my mother's family was my primary family. Lots of aunts and uncles, a lot of comedy, a lot of love, and what sometimes didn't feel necessarily like support, but always was, a lot of conversation, politics. My family was very active in movement. My mom was in SNCC when she was in high school. She actually went to Atlanta and trained for nonviolence in the, was that summer of 64? I believe that's the year. But she went there, and she carried that with her, all of that, I guess, social activism was always the backdrop of our upbringing. And so there was always a consciousness that kind of pervaded the household, a very serious level of consciousness. And we were always, like, reading and going to the library and researching different topics. I mean, it wasn't, drudgery. It was always, like, just part of the ether. Both my parents worked outside the home. I was raised in primarily Southern California, Central California. I live in Oakland now, but I always had this kind of a little strange relationship with where I was growing up, because it wasn't like home. And I say that because growing up in California, I lived primarily in the suburbs, and they were, I had left a predominantly black environment and kind of been thrust into this world that I didn't understand and that I felt like didn't understand me. And it was just really different because, you have to understand, we grew up in Arkansas. There was an HBCU right down the street. Everybody I knew went to that college. All the family, friends, everybody was a very close-knit black community that was sort of self-contained. And that community is still there. It's not what it was, but it was definitely something that grounded me, grounded my brothers, and I knew it was always something that felt like love. You know what I mean? It was very, and I always yearned for that. In fact, I used to have dreams about going home when I had a recurring dream about going home when I was a little girl. It was a dream I always dreamed, because I always felt like sort of out of place in California.
A lot of people listening would just think maybe the opposite. They would, you think of Arkansas, you don't think of a big city life in the state. And then you hear California, and you think, oh, wow. And I've heard other people say that. I've heard other people say, I think Felicia Rashad was saying that it's that down home, wherever that is for you, where your community is, where everybody knows everybody.
Right.
And you can go to anybody. You're safe with any of your neighbors. Everybody knows everybody by first name. I don't know if communities are still like that as much with technology. We spend so much time online rather than in person. But when I was a kid, you knew everybody on the block.
Right.
You knew everybody. You knew everybody.
Yes.
So I can see where you're coming from. So when you were growing up, whether it was in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, or California, when you were a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh.
I wanted to be a doctor. That was the thing, and I don't know necessarily if that was my dream. I know that I had this idea somehow that I was going to be a doctor because, you know, that was what everybody dreamed of being. I think when I was around 12, I started thinking about being a writer. I did, because I've always written.
What made you take that shift? That's a good big shift from being a doctor to wanting to be a writer. What inspired that?
I started writing when I was 12. And I always like to say this, and I talk to when I'm dealing with my students, I say the same thing, that the writing process really is taking what's going on inside your head and putting it on paper and allowing other people to enter your thoughts, right? But also connecting, seeing where they connect with you in your thoughts, because, you know, people will connect to what's relatable within what you share. And, you know, human beings have we have the same ideas about things, just how we communicate them. But what happened was I kind of lived, because I grew up very kind of isolated in California, I had a very, very strong interior life. I was always considering things and studying the way things felt and the way they looked and smelled and tasted. I was always in this process of like, and I don't know that other people necessarily do that. I saw other people like living. You know? People, you know what I mean? Like, I saw other people engaged in like the process of living, but I was always kind of considering this and that. And when I was 12, I was actually in school in Arkansas, and boredom drove me to write the first thing that I wrote. And it was, I was staying with my grandmother for a year. My grandfather had just passed away, and I was bored to death. I was literally like, I went to school in Arkansas, and it was completely different from schools in California. In Arkansas, they expected you to sit down and be quiet and don't bother nobody, right? And I had a 2-hour study hall. Ooh. And I never had homework. I had a 2-hour study hall, and we were expected to sit there and be still, you know. And one day, because I kept getting in trouble and kept getting put out of class because I would be laughing and talking with my friends, my teacher, I came up with a solution for myself, right? And I had just been sitting there, and I walked up to Ms. Hartsfield, that was her name, and she, like, put down her newspaper to look to see what I wanted. And I said, Ms. Hartsfield, I said, you know what? If I write something for you, I have an idea and I want to write something. I said, if it's good, you read it and it's good, will you pay me for it? Oh, God. Oh, go ahead. Some writers have trouble asking for money for their marketing now. You already had it at 12. Good for you. Right? I did. I was marketing at that moment. And she said, yeah, go ahead. Like, she appreciated, I guess, my inventiveness and my, whatever, my getting after it. So, I went and sat down and I wrote this piece, and I remember what it was today. It was about me and my brothers floating down. There's a place here in California, Northern California, called the Russian River, and we had rafted down there, down the river, and like on both sides of a tall redwoods and pine trees. And I just remembered that scene. And so I wrote the scene. I don't think there was no arc in in the thing. It was just like, an impression. And I wrote it out for her, and she read it. She liked it, and she gave me 50 cents.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think that just, like, turned me on, and I never lost that feeling and desire to it did something for me. Not necessarily the monetary part, but the process. I could see that I could go into a scene and recreate it. I would love to see what I wrote then, if I could go back in time just to see like what I thought and what I put down on paper.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. And you know that your teacher had the wherewithal to see just how much of an encouragement and motivator that could be. Even though it's just only 50 cents, it's telling you somebody believed enough in what you wrote and your work to pay you for it. Even if it had just been a nickel, I think at that age, that I can just see your face lighting up like, wow. It's so amazing. Now, you're also an educator, Tasha. Before we start talking about Call Me Freedom, you're an educator, and you've taught English at Shabbat College. How has that experience as an educator impacted your writing?
Well, I've had to teach writing for years now. I taught high school English until 2013 when I retired. And I had to teach writing. I had to actually, be able to teach high school students how to write an essay, how to, not necessarily grammar, but because I also taught like the AP English courses, I had to teach them style, right? So I had to be able to teach them argument, rhetoric, how to use language and manipulate it. Not manipulate it, but, enhance what it is that you're trying to achieve in your writing. So that was golden for me. It was such a blessing. I never, ever thought that going through that process would be as I knew that it would cause me to grow as much as I did as a writer. And I'm still growing. I'm not really where I want to be. I think I can write. Don't get me wrong. I think I can write, right? I think Miss Hartsfield, when I was in 7th grade, made me feel like I could write. So I've never lacked confidence. It's just that I think there's always room to get better.
Right.
But teaching writing actually has enhanced my writing, and also seeing how much the education system, like the social implications of education, it's very powerful just to witness it, especially in the public school setting. Very powerful.
So you went from wanting to be a doctor, and then after this question, the next one we're going to start talking about Call Me Freedom. But you went from wanting to be a doctor, and then you sort of just kind of went into writing. You were bored. You just decided that you had such a rich internal life. You wanted to share that with others. How did you go from being a student? 2-hour study hall at 12 is like almost like punishment. But how did you go from that to actually wanting to be an English teacher? Sometimes for kids, they're like, I'm done with school. I don't ever want to see a kid.
Right.
What made you decide to go into English? I can, in my mind, that would only strengthen your writing tremendously. But how did you navigate down that path?
Well, when I was in high school, and I think I need to say this, is that my brother, my family always wrote. And my mother, I just remember her always writing in her journal. She would be in her room in the evening, always journaling. And my grandmother was a very, very avid reader. She had stacks and stacks of books, like always. And so that was like, and so everybody in my family, for the most part, read a lot. Coincidentally, or because of that, everybody in my family, most of us who finished school and went on into our careers, like there are a couple people who went into business, but everybody else is in education. They're either writers or professors or like social workers. But that's like, so, but that was the environment that we grew up in. And my grandparents were always reading and always discussing like what was going on in the world. And so that was the environment that we came out of. And it wasn't just that, it was even in California, the people that I grew up with, my stepfather's family, while not necessarily, they were all teachers. So, it was just kind of the natural thing. But I also loved literature. And I found that when I was in high school, I was really good at it. I was like an AP honors student. And so I stayed with that. And what's really strange is that we didn't read any Black authors at all when I was in high school. So it's just amazing to me that I stayed, plugged in, is that we were reading Chaucer and Shakespeare and all of like the American classics and all those novels that are part of the canon. But there was something in it that just intrigued me. And I stayed with it, and I became an English major when I went to college. I was also a math major, but I dropped that because I was like, no, this is the thing, because I had a double major. And I said, no, this is the thing that actually to me it was easier. I didn't want to do math homework every day.
Okay.
So I stuck with English.
Interesting. And I appreciate you sharing that little bit of backstory on your family. It's almost was like a natural transition with what you're saying, your mom journaling and different people in your family loving to read books. And so that was already there before you. I love the cover. We want to talk now about Call Me Freedom. I love the cover of that book. It just it's so the artwork, and it's so unique that it just grabs your attention, and that's what a good book cover is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you look. I want to know more about that. Who illustrated the cover?
Isn't it beautiful though?
It is. Who illustrated the cover?
It's a woman by the name of Shell Barber. She's an artist here from Oakland. I think she's at the Art Institute of Chicago right now. Wow. But she does this Afrofuturism, these collages that are just amazing. She's incredible. And we commissioned this piece, I think. Actually, we purchased this piece, and she read some of the book, and then she did some alterations to it, and then we added our little thing. So if you study the cover, you'll know what's in the book, or you get a really good idea of what's in the book. So yeah, she did a wonderful job. I love her work.
Yeah, and it's just an attention grabber. Now, what is, for our off-the-shelf listeners, tell us, Tasha, what's the inspiration behind the book Call Me Freedom?
Well, you know what? I had a different title, but I changed it to Call Me Freedom because I wanted to own what was in here. And it really was me kind of stepping up and actually being a little bit more vulnerable and also a lot more bold in claiming my place in America. And to me, this book, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks, and what they always say is that it's beautiful, and I know that it's also powerful, but it's also something that is not easy. And what I write about is my experience, my family's experience, and some of our history in America, and what parts of it I want to claim and what parts I don't want to have to carry anymore. And a lot of it has to do with me breaking free from a lot of the impositions from society, claiming my own space, claiming what I've earned and what my people have earned, and also what's mine by birth. You know what I mean? Like, I talk a lot about how I never really thought about myself as, I never really placed myself in America as like a full American citizen. I never thought of myself in that way. Like, what does that mean? And what part of this belongs to me? But I also do this, I draw a parallel with the idea of America and being something that I never claimed with the idea of my father, whom I had never claimed and whom I had just kind of blocked out of my consciousness in a way. And so unraveling that, I think I did that in the same sort of way. And it's a struggle, but I think if you read the book, you can see what I get to.
Now, can you give our listeners an overview of Call Me Freedom, a Black American Woman's Break from Empire? Are these like poems, journal entries, songs, essays? Can you let us give us an overview of the book and let us know some of the format that it's written in?
Okay, well, it's written in chapters, and it's a literary memoir. And so it begins with me, because that's just the style that I write in. And it begins with me kind of confronting a very deep hurt from when I was, that happened like maybe 15 years ago. Something that I had kind of ignored or had repressed or suppressed so that I wouldn't have to deal with it. Wouldn't have to deal with the emotions attached to it. And it has to do with ownership and denial and actually stepping up to be a woman, really full-fledged, and claiming her space. And I start out with that, and I go through what it meant for me to confront that, and why I hadn't confronted it, why I never, I've always been very considerate of other people, always kind of step back and let others go before me, made myself kind of small, and I really do believe that that's something that I was taught to do. Yeah. That I was actually really taught to do that, and I was taught, and I don't know if it was necessary. Some of it was something that was explicit, and a lot of it was implied, is that these other folks deserve to go in front of you, so let them pass.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so it was that sort of thing, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about breaking away from, and I talk about how this is sort of the training that I experienced, and awakening to that thing was kind of shattering, and I got to the point where I couldn't sleep, and going through the process of not being able to sleep, and then having to deal with and trying to unearth what it was that was causing me this discomfort, to the point where I could not lay down and be still and close my eyes. It took a lot of work, but it was, you see the butterflies on the cover of the book. It was a freeing experience. And that's the key.
I have to ask you this, because this comes up in when I'm writing, in my novels as well, and sometimes when I'm writing even on a novel, something will come to, I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought of that before or saw it that way before. I know something I thought I learned as a kid was that a good woman, she sacrifices. She sacrifices and she suffers a lot. And that's what a good woman does. And so nobody came out and verbally said that to me. It's just what you see and comments you hear people say. You know, she's still with him and he's treating her bad, but she's a good woman and she loves her kids, so she's going to hang in there. She's a good woman. And so that's a message coming through. How did you, when you say what you learned, for parents who might be listening, and they don't want to teach that message, but they could be and not be aware of it, are there some ways that you said it was implied that if when you share one or two examples, a parent could say, oh, I got to stop doing that?
Well, you know what? One comes to mind immediately, but I'll go to that next. I'll talk about that second. But the first thing I think was I didn't get, even I was a quiet child. Like I spoke earlier about having like this interior life, right? I was quiet. And I was always the child who didn't act up in the store. You know what I mean? And so my parents always thought that I was okay, that I was okay with everything. Like my older brother would throw a fit if he didn't get his way about something. And I didn't want my mother to feel, I always had compassion for my mother. I don't know where I got that from, but I always had compassion for my mother, and I never, ever wanted her to be upset. So I was very well behaved. And I kind of took care of him. I was really self-sufficient. But that didn't mean that I was okay. And it didn't mean that I didn't have needs. And nobody ever said, how do you feel? How are you doing? It was always, you know, did you take a bath? Did you eat? Are you, you know, that kind of stuff. Come home before dark. It was always directive. There was never any question about how I was feeling about things and whether or not I was well. What kind of day did you have? I never got those sort of questions. Never. But my brothers somehow, I had three brothers. I have one now. But my brothers somehow were able to get that attention from our parents. And I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they had a different relationship with my mother. My mother and I talk a lot now, and my dad and I, my stepdad and I, we talk a lot. And but there's always some, like there's a little bit of a shield, a sheath between us, I want to call it, that is not super intimate. And I mean, I think some of that it might be from like the hurt that I experienced, like not really getting that attention and not having my emotional needs met or even inquired about. The second thing that I
oh my God, I'm listening to you. I'm wondering how many other listeners can look back and say, somebody told me once it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. You see it at work. You see it in homes. I've seen it at worship centers. The one who either cries the most or the loudest causes the most confusion or chaos. That's who everybody's focused on. That's who everybody's focused on. The one who's going along, no big issues.
Getting
People
good
are
grades.
very appreciative that they're, not crying, not throwing a fit, not causing any chaos. But you're not going to get the attention of one who's causing the chaos is getting.
No. And you don't get the comfort. You don't get any of those things. And I didn't realize that until later. And so today I have grown. My daughters are both. My oldest is 30 and my other daughter is 28. I think I started to repeat that pattern. I may have done it the entire time that they were growing up. It doesn't mean that I didn't express love and I say I love you, but to inquire with like, well, how was your day? And tell me how are you feeling? So today when I talk to them, because we talk on the phone, I say, how are you feeling? What's going on with you? You know, not just like small talk and jokes and whatnot. Yeah. I have to be really intentional about it because I'll forget, because that's how I was raised, right?
And you know what? I think a lot of people were raised that way. It's a good point that you bring up. Do you dig into that in the book?
About the emotionality, having my emotional needs met.
Yeah. And
I talk about it with my father. I talk about it in terms of my father, and how I was never. And this is not the second thing, but in that relationship, he was absent, but it was something I was never able to talk about because it made my parents uncomfortable. I could never inquire about him. He was an enigma, and so I never was able to feel what it meant for him to be absent. I never allowed myself to think that I needed him. And so that was in admitting that thing. It took me, I had to be like 45 before I ever admitted that I needed him. And I write about that in the book, that it was a young man who stood up one time at a conference that I teach in this program called Emoji at Chabot. And this young brother stood up. He was a youngster. He was a student. And he asked this man who was like formerly incarcerated. He was, speaking in this conference. And he asked him how he felt, or if he ever thought about the children that he left when he went to prison. And when he asked it, I started crying.
Wow.
Yeah. And it just like he touched something in me with that question, because the cat who was up front, he was stunned. My father didn't go to prison. He was in Vietnam. And so it was for a totally different reason that he was gone. But I related to that young man. Yeah, and I was probably about 45 then. But let me share the second thing with you. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, go ahead. No.
The second thing was, and I don't want to forget this, that's why I keep, is I remember when I went away to college, or when I got a letter saying that I had been accepted to Spelman, I remember my mother saying to me, and it had to do with her upbringing, right? She said to me, "Oh, that's wonderful. You'll go and get you a good husband."
Oh, my goodness. That's funny. But you know what, the generation your mom came from, I'm guessing, because I'm thinking back to the generation from my mother and my definitely my grandmother, my aunts and uncles, my aunts. That was the thing. You went and got a husband. I mean, that was the biggest blessing you would ever get in this lifetime.
Right.
No, I'm serious. And it's not like that now, but that was huge.
Yeah, and I was shocked because, like, I'm talking to my former roommate, we're good girlfriends from that time, and my friend, she said her parents never said anything like that to her. She said they were like, you go, and her father told her, you go and get your degree, and you come home and you be independent, and you support yourself, and you don't need it. You know what I mean? But no, I was very, very, I don't know if I could say bourgeois. It was very middle class, You're going to go and find a husband. You're going to go on with your life and get yourself a nice degree. Maybe you'll be a school teacher. It was that. But that was a value system. And I did not even, I write about that in the book. that I did not even notice it when she said it.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. So it was so much of it. You were hearing so much of this dialogue around you that it didn't even jump out at you. Like, wow, that's odd.
No. But you know what? When I went to school, I kept a boyfriend.
Yeah.
So I received that message.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You know, I'm listening to you. For our listeners, we're interviewing Tasha Keeble, the author of Call Me Freedom, a Black American woman breaks from empire. Your book, although it's autobiographical, it could really help a reader to heal, and in ways you might not imagine. If they, like when you were hearing that gentleman speak who had been in prison, and somebody asked him what did he think about him being away from his kids. It's somebody listening to what you share, and they're like, wow, that's similar to something I went through, and they might not even realize it's something holding them back or a struggle or belief until they read, like, Call Me Freedom, and what a wonderful title. Just listen to you talk about it, Call Me Freedom, like a perfect title. Now, Tasha, this is written at Amazon in the book's description about Call Me Freedom, a Black American woman breaks from empire. One explores the narrator's life and family relationships, and the second gauges and evaluates her interior life relative to the outside world to free herself from a stultifying duty handed her as a middle-class Black woman to piously attend to everyone's needs before her own. I wanted to ask you, having read that, had you spent, and when did you stop? Had you spent your life pursuing other people's requests, desires, and needs, and almost to where you weren't even aware of your own? Had you spent your lifetime doing that? And when did you awaken and say, I'm thinking of Yana Van Zandt. She said one day her soul just opened up. When did you wake up and say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore?
It was when I couldn't sleep. I had gone through cycles of kind of like unraveling, kind of peeling the onion, because it was the layers were so heavy. You know, I don't think any of us, and I can't speak for all Black women, but I look at my sisters, right? And I mean my sisters, other Black women, and I see myself in them. And I think we call ourselves sisters because we understand each other. We relate a great deal to each other, and we understand the things that we experience. Not everything, but we experience many of the same things. And for me, peeling back those layers took years. Right, and it would be something different would come to light, and I would make progress, and then I would fall back into it. And especially what really triggered me falling back into that behavior of letting others take up my space or treat me in a way that was not what I deserved, and then walking away from it and not telling them, hey, you know what, that's not okay, and I would appreciate an apology. Or I'm not going to fool with you because you can't treat me that way, right? I never did things like that. But what happened was I couldn't sleep, and I had to face it. And what it was that I was so concerned with this idea that I had to be, that if I wasn't like the perfectly sacrificing sister, daughter, mother, that somehow I was inadequate. Somehow I wasn't doing it right. You know, and I was like, my soul was aching. I used to drink a lot. Like I would take care of my children, would be beautiful, go to school, they read early. You know, they were just, everybody loved, you know, they were shiny and going to school, and mama was suffering.
Yeah.
You know, I was working hard and taking care of everything. And it was, the first step was like when I stopped drinking. Then I was able to have my feelings again. But then it was like within my family, it was one death after another death after another death. And I know that we experience this as in this country. I just lost another friend of mine last week. another sister who she was only 44 years old. Heartbreaking. We went to grad school together. But it's like when those tragedies happen, who steps up to take care of everything?
Yeah,
it's the women.
Yeah. Yes, yep. That still remain unchanged. I mean, society is changing slowly. You see fathers helping more with their kids. I mean, my dad raised all 5 of us after my mom passed, but you see more and more fathers stepping up to help with their children. But look how long this is taking, and it's still
look
the
at
mother.
how long.
Yeah, but it's still nowhere equal. It's still the woman who works a full-time job. Years ago, you saw the man working harder outside the home. Then women worked outside the home and still take care of the kids. So somehow I feel like a little trick got played. A little trick got played, and we got the short end of the stick, and we thought that this is just the way God wants it. And so it's like a little trick got played on us. And I think more and more women are waking up saying, you know what, I'm this far, no further. Now, I really call me freedom. This is with you being transparent. I can see what a reader again could heal as they read your story, because their guard will be down. They won't think there's anything about them. It's just reading your story. Now that said, I know you mentioned your father. He was in Vietnam. And when your father passed, you said you barely knew him, yet his passing had a significant impact. So, Tasha, I wanted to ask you, do you think that we misassign importance to relationships and events? There are people who have had really traumatic things happen, and they just repress it in their memory. They don't even remember it until it pops up later. But do you think that we tend to misassign the importance to relationships and events like saying, that was no big deal? And they actually are a key or pivotal event in our life.
That's a great question. I think so. And I think about it as soon as you asked that question. I thought about my friend Lance, because he and I talk every day. He's like my best friend. And he has, in his response to like trauma, he doesn't respond the way that a person, like I would think, the way that I would respond. So the way that he explained it to me is that because he has bipolar condition, and I don't think he would mind me sharing that, but he said that he puts that thing, whatever is happening, in a box when it happens, because he can't respond in the way that his mind wants to respond, because he wouldn't be able to handle it. So he immediately goes into analyzing the situation. Sometimes he makes me mad because I say, Lance, this is like real and this is like some trauma, because we saw an accident one time. And anyway, and so for me, I think that a lot of times we just try to get through whatever the thing is, right? And we don't necessarily have the tools to process it. And sometimes it's just so much. It's just so much. I think about members of my family who have been through horrific things, especially with all this gun violence in our society, especially the level of gun violence that our children are experiencing and our family members. To me, it's that is right there. It doesn't go anywhere. It's sitting right there to be dealt with. And a lot of times it comes out like, crazy, because we don't process it.
Right.
And for me, a lot of my life had been, especially after the death of my older brother, had been just, hold it together. You got to hold it together. You got to take care of the family. You got to take care of everybody else. You got to take care of your children. You got to keep going to work. You got to finish school. And I really, really worked. I finished, like I always tell my dad when he tries to correct my English, I say, listen, sir. I said, I have 4 degrees in English. I said, I know how to finesse the language. So during all of that, I completed 4 degrees in English.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. But at the same time, I was trying to take care of everybody except myself and thinking I could, like, somehow pass through. Like I would escape what, you know, our bodies, what science tells us our bodies are going to go through if we are not taking care of them.
Yes.
And our mind. Yeah.
What inspired you to start writing letters to your father? I've done that with people close to me who've transitioned, and I found it extremely helpful. But what inspired you to start writing letters to your father?
What inspired me, you know what, I think I had been, and I write about this in the book, I had written a whole book, almost 400 pages, and my father was nowhere in it. Yeah, and it was a little bit of a memoir, but my father was not in it. And I think that for me, I'm trying to think of what made me think about, I know what it was. It was something that my brother told me, and it was a question that my little brother asked me. I'm not going to share it because it's a little bit too personal, but it triggered this idea that I needed to, like, really interrogate this relationship and why it is that this is so distant from me and why it's so below the surface. And maybe if I dig this out, I will experience some freedom from whatever is ailing me. And it actually did. It felt really good to go through it. I have to say that the process of writing this book, just writing it, was
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was amazing to me. Every day I was just so excited, like, let me get back to this, let me get back, and just push through it. And I just, you know what, and I have to say this, and I'm going to say this really quickly, is that I really wanted, and I've given the book to a friend of mine. I got feedback from everybody. I have blurbs, you know, from different people, but I never really got another Black woman's opinion about the book. And I asked my sister about it because she's going to tell me, oh, it's great, right? She's going to tell me, she's like, oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, I love this. My sister's a writer too.
Okay.
But I wanted, and I could not get another Black woman to sit down, read this book, and tell me. I've given it to a poet friend of mine who's supposed to get back to me. Because I said, I want your honest feedback. Like, what do you feel? Do you feel like this is genuine, authentic? Do you feel like it's real? Is it, do you know what I mean? Yeah, and I kind of get this sense that it's very close to home for a lot of women, for a lot of Black women, maybe too close to home. But I think that I think it's a good book.
Yes, yeah. You know what? And again, it's because people think it's not about them. They won't be defensive. Now, I wanted to ask you, in what ways is the message or the messages shared in Call Me Freedom, a Black American Woman Breaks from Empire, similar to the stories in A Color, that What's in A Color Purpose aims to share? Because that came to me when I was researching. In what ways are they? Do you think they're similar? The messages in both of those books? Well,
I think the message, and I appreciate that question because Alice Walker is in this book, and Alice Walker, I actually heard something she said is actually in here. One of her books, 2 of her books, and then a quote that I heard her say one time. She was standing right in front of me, but it's really about. It's almost like taboo subjects in a way. Some of it. Like it touches a little bit on that, but it has to do with family. It has to do with love, how we express love, how we break away from the patterns and the hurt that was done to us. And it's not just as women, but women within families. And it's this thing that Angela Davis says, it's that we can't really get to the heart of the matter. And it's another thing, who else says this? It'll come to me in a second. If we don't take what's going on in society and see how it is affecting the inside of our household, right? Like all of that stuff, the messaging that I got that my parents gave to me and my family gave to me, which made me behave in the way that I did and become the woman that I needed to change to get free, all of that stuff came from outside of our household. All of those messages, my parents weren't born thinking that way. They were programmed to think that way. They were socialized to teach me to be this way. And Angela Davis says that oppressive systems reach their highest point and function within our families. And we don't know it necessarily. And some people might disagree, but we don't, and it's not to blame the family, not at all. It's to like examine it and see how we can get a little bit more free if we want to be free. And some of us don't want to be free. And that's another story.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And just the two of those, because the color purple is powerful. So what you share and call me Freedom of Color in Purple is fictional. Yours is a real life story. So I can just see where a reader would go away feeling. And some people don't want to be shaken up that much. They're like, no.
Right.
And then some people are ready, or they just think that they're reading somebody else's story. So then their defenses are down, and then they can get the benefits from it as they continue to read it. Now, Tasha, I love your writing style. Considering your writing style, have you ever thought about writing a novel? And if you did, what do you think that novel would be about?
Oh, my goodness. I am writing a novel.
Okay.
I am writing a novel, and I can tell you what it's about. And it's interesting you asked me because I just connected with this brother here in the Bay Area. He's doing a film, and I didn't know he was. We're connected through like this independent press here, but he is doing a documentary on the same topic that I'm writing a novel on. And it's about the Elaine riots of 1919 in Arkansas. And it was a lot of people don't know about it, right? Because it was kind of a hidden history, but it happened at this church called Hoop Spur. And the novel that I'm writing has to do with what happened it was started because black farmers who were black sharecroppers and white sharecroppers had come together, and they were trying to form a union so that they could get decent prices for their crops. And that resulted in them being massacred during the meeting. And then the men who they chose, like, I think it was 9 black men who were tried by the state of Arkansas, and they were going to be executed. And anyway, so that central story it's connected to the novel that I'm writing with a woman from Oakland who goes back to her home in Arkansas to try and deal with some of her history and her grandfather.
Oh, my goodness. That sounds like a good one. Is it a bit of a mystery? Is there some mystery in there for the reader?
There is a bit of a mystery. You know how you it unfolds and like the climax scene, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but it's a little bit speculative in that there's a little bit of, I'm not going to say magic, but there's a little bit of surrealism in it. And, I think it's, I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be dope.
Oh, it sounds excellent. When do you think readers can go pick it up? Is it a year out, 2 years out?
I would imagine a year out. I should be done with it, I would say, by Christmas, by the winter, because yeah.
Oh, my goodness. What a treat. You guys, We are coming up on the top of the hour. We have what a treat. Tasha Keeble. She is the author of Call Me Freedom, a Black American woman breaks free from empire. And you just heard the novel she's working on. I mean, she really gets down and for the heart of her story. So looking forward to that novel when it comes out. Tasha, I got to ask you this. Do you have a website? And if you do, please share your website URL.
I don't have a website. I hate to say this. Anybody, you can Google me. You can find a way to contact me if you want to. But I just got off of social media yesterday. I closed all my accounts. I hate to say it because I need to write.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anybody can reach me, buy the book, and you know, I'm available for whatever anybody needs. Just hit me up.
Okay, Tasha Keeble, you guys, author of Call Me Freedom, a Black American woman breaks from empire. Thank you so much for being here with us, Tasha, and for what you share in your book and also here on Off the Shelf. To our listeners, please come back. Mark your calendars, Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York City time. You're going to catch Off the Shelf Books podcast. Saturdays, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tell your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, book lovers everywhere to tune in to Off the Shelf on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as I always tell you, you are incredible. You're awesome. You really, really, really are amazing. Go out and create a fabulous day for yourself. I'll see you guys back here next Saturday. Tasha, I'll send you a link to the show when it finishes streaming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye for now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.